Welcome all and welcome back into the Insight NFL podcast. Thursday, the 4th of December, kicking off week 14. Man, week 14, the final week of the regular season for us here in the traditional fantasy land. Secko, it's been a long ride, absolutely long ride here. We've got our week 14 primer. We're kicking off with a banger tomorrow in the highest point implied total of the week. The Cowboys taking on the Lions in Detroit in a dome. How do you feel about this one to kick us off here in week 14?
Yeah, mate, I'm pumped. This is probably the best Thursday night game we've had. We've had a lot of stinkers we've had to endure on a Friday afternoon. So, looking back to some of those 10-7 results, there's just been a lot of crap. We still watch it because it's a Friday island game that we get, and they start off at 10:15, then 11:15, and 12:15 down here in Victoria. So now it's a full afternoon of it, and this one should just be massive. Like both defenses aren't really smashing at the moment. But both offenses are really key to just go and throw a lot. So yeah, looking forward. A lot of pieces in this game, so I'm looking forward to talking to it in a little bit.
Plenty of injuries in this game too, especially on that defensive side. We've got the Cowboys, Trayvon Diggs. I mean, we'll get to injuries in a moment, but just to kind of go through this game a little bit. Trayvon Diggs, cornerback for those guys, he's out. On the other side of the ball, Kirby Joseph and Terry and Arnold are out in that secondary for the Lions. Should be plenty of yards in this game, which should account to plenty of points. Secko, who do you like to win this game if you were just to take the money line at that?
Yeah, it's a tough call. I was thinking about it just before we got on. Lions being 3-point favorite is purely a home game call, 54.5. So they project that both teams are going to score over 25. It literally could be a game that comes down to the final drive in the mid-30s. So I honestly think the Lions will win because if they lose, they're pretty much out of the playoffs. And they do get up. They do get up for the big games. They always generally bounce back after losses, and especially on Thanksgiving in the way they did, losing Amon-Ra. Don't think he's going to play this week. I feel like it's all sort of Dan Campbellness will come through the team a bit. So, it's only because it's at home. If it was in Dallas, I'd probably think it was them. But they've been lights out too. They've beat the Chiefs last week, and they've had a really good last month, led by Dak. Who, if they weren't, what are they, 5-6-1? If they weren't have such a bad record, I think Dak could be favourite for the MVP just purely on the way he's playing.
Yeah, I might have to go on the other side in this one. I was thinking about it just before. I was like, I don't know, Dallas. I might take him with that 3 points. It should be very close. It's a 54-point total or 54.5, which is absolutely monstrous. We love to see it in a dome. Then again, that's Goff. That's his natural habitat, so he normally does perform in those moments. But we will get down to the Week 14 breakdown. But before we get into it, we do have some injuries coming up. If you did miss last night's SuperCoach Trade Talk show, link is in below. Also to go with our Week 13 review and recovery that we launched on Monday. So let's jump straight into the injury reports before we give our stats of the week. In the first game of the week, I did mention Trayvon Diggs, Kirby Joseph out for both secondaries in this one. Tyler Guyton, the starting right tackle for the Cowboys, is also ruled out in this one too. So again, he was ruled out last week. They beat the Chiefs, but we'll have to wait and see how that kind of plays out for this week tomorrow. Trey Benson, Secko, it did not practice at the first practice of this week. Also, Marvin Harrison Jr. dealing with that heel injury. How do you feel about both of them? I think Marv is probably trending on that line of probably not playing. Benson, I probably thought similar, but as you brought up before we started recording, Imari DiMarcado is also looking like he won't play. So it could just be Bam Knight. They could need to bring in Benson. How do you feel about these two for the Cards?
Yeah, I think Harrison misses just purely the way it's been spoken about, pretty much after and throughout. Looks like he'll miss again, which is great for Michael Wilson, which we'll talk about later. Benson's such a weird case. He was on track to come back. He was activated off IR before week 12. He was a chance there. He limited practice that week. And then going to last week, he limited practice on the Wednesday and then DMP'd Thursday, Friday. And it sort of seems like it must be a re-aggravation, which is never good. And then this week again, first practice yesterday, DMP. Now he was activated off the IR, as I said, a couple of weeks ago. They have 21 days to activate them to the active roster. Otherwise, they have to miss the whole year. And Trey Benson's the kind of guy. So essentially, they have till next Wednesday to activate him. Otherwise, he sits for the entire year. And I think just in the situation, I think we spoke about it last week, maybe or maybe on Monday. The Cardinals are in a weird spot. They need to sort of see what they've got with Benson. He only had a couple of games as a lead dog when Connor went out. I think they're going to want to see him. So I think he comes back next week. Because the reality is they've got James Conner. He's 31. He's injured again. They save 8 mil cap space if they cut him at the end of this year. I think they're going to want to see what they've got in Benson for at least 4 weeks. So if he comes back next week, he gets 4 straight weeks. I think he'll be the lead dog. They'll run him. They'll see how good he is and how resilient he is with a competent quarterback and not Kyler Murray like he had at the start. So I think he sits again. If you've got him in fantasy, hopefully you're in the playoffs and you might get him for a decent run. If not next week, 16, 17 could be really good for Benson owners.
Yeah, it's a tough spot for the Cardinals. They've been eliminated from the playoffs after losing last week. But again, like you mentioned, they just need to see what they've got in Benson, and hopefully he can get a nice run down the stretch because their schedule is very, very juicy. I think they played Cincinnati in week 17, which is just an absolute banger that could come through for you. Another running back, a rookie, Dylan Sampson for the Browns, did not practice as well. So it's looking to be all Judkins this week, like it pretty much is every week, but that does help. Parker Washington dealing with a hip injury for the Jags. He probably won't play. Dante Thornton, wide receiver for the Raiders, he's dealing with the concussion that he sustained last week. Probably won't play. Drake London, Secko for the Falcons. It was kind of Coach Raheem Morris for those guys came out and said he was day-to-day a couple of weeks ago. This will be his 3rd week missed if he doesn't play. Again, the Falcons, I don't know if they're completely ruled out of playoff contention, but they're probably, after this game, you'd think they'd be very close. Do you think London plays in this game? Do you think he plays at all for the rest of the season? How do you feel about him moving forward?
Yeah, look, it's not great. Do not DMP after 2 weeks off. Wednesday practice doesn't bode well. They've got a less than 1% chance of making playoffs, so they're out, and they know they're out. So it's a case of why unfortunately I think for London owners it may be a case of why put him in there. Better to just leave him out, get it completely fixed up, and get ready for next year with a new quarterback or Penix back if he can. I think Penix isn't back till mid-season, so it could be one of those situations where they just sit him. If he's DMP'd again tomorrow, it's probably real bad signs, and you may need to look to just to someone else to start. He may be back next week, but again, it may not happen, which is unfortunate because he was so good and he was on such a hot run before he got injured as well. So we'll see. Watch his space. Training or practice tomorrow will be a massive one for. If he limited practices, he may be back. If he DMPs again, almost draw a line through him this week.
And a lot of other players that we still need to wait and see how the rest of the week plays out in the practices over there in the States. A lot of guys to monitor, so make sure you're staying in tuned with socials if you are relying on some of these guys to play. Aaron Jones, after re-injuring his shoulder, he's a limited practice. He could play. I'd probably lean towards the chance that he doesn't, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Dalton Kincaid, he's a limited practice. He's missed the last couple of weeks with that hamstring injury. The Bills need him bad in a must-win against the Bengals. If he does come back, I'd roll him straight into my lineup against the Bengals. They're the worst defense against tight ends. They're on a historic pace to be the worst defense ever against that position. In that same game, T. Higgins, Secko, he was dealing with concussion. He missed last week. Still in that protocol. He did have a limited practice. How do you feel about him coming back in this game for Joe Burrow up against the Bills?
Yeah, it was a big hit. It's one that we've seen it a few times this year. Concussions usually they're only 1 weekers, but we've seen quite a few cases recently that they missed the second week. I know Jackson Dart did. There was someone else a couple of weeks ago who missed 2 weeks. Or Stroud, and we thought we called it a soft benching. I think it was a concussion, but it was someone else anyway. All the sort of talk out of Cincinnati is that he might miss again, which is really, really strange and concerning. But if he does, it's again, it should be just a Chase, absolute bonanza for Chase. and Chase Brown probably benefit the most. But again, watch his status. If he's practicing again, trending towards clearing the protocol, you'll have plenty of time to make that call on him if you've got him in your starting lineups.
We also have Justin Herbert. He had surgery on his non-throwing hand this week. Looking like he might play this week up against the Eagles, which is just, he's an absolute beast. Solid chance to start. I mean, coming off that surgery, I know like we're not NFL players, but there's absolutely no way. Because if he just takes one hit to that could be super devastating for him. I don't want to say it's a must win, but they really do need that win up against the Eagles. The Eagles really need it too. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out with Herbert. Another star quarterback who may play this week, Jaden Daniels, after dislocating that elbow. It looked that bad. I thought he's done for the year. There's no way he's coming back. Commanders they've only got 4 wins or whatnot. How do you feel about Jaden Daniels, Secko, up against the Commanders? I think they play the Vikings this week from memory. So again, 2 bottom dwelling teams at this point. But if Daniels is ready to go, how do you feel about that offense as a whole?
It looks a lot better last week. And I don't want to say it's all because Terry was back, but it looked like it was all because Terry was back. He only played, I think he had a 53 or 54% route participation rate, and still led the team in receptions. So yeah, he just straightens them right up by the look of it. And I think if Daniels is fit to play, he'll come in. They won't rush him because we've seen Mariota's been better than I thought he would be. He's actually controlling that offense pretty well. Rodriguez is doing a good job running it, and Mariota himself is able to run it. So they're out of playoffs. They're not going to rush a second-year player who's the 10 to 12-year future of the club. If he's not 100%. So it's a dislocated elbow. Again, if it's not quite there and gets hit again, it can do it, do more damage. So I expect him to be back before the end of the season. I think he'll definitely play at some point. But I just don't think they're going to rush it unless they absolutely know he's 100%. So I think this week's definitely Mariota, and then we'll see what happens from next week and onwards.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think Terry McLaurin, that was a massive boost for those guys last week.
Mm.
And more wide receivers that are slated to return, which would be super surprising. Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan for the Buccaneers. Mike Evans dealing with that collarbone. I think he's a couple of weeks ahead of schedule from that. Both of these guys have had limited practices. So again, just stay in tune with what's coming out these next couple of days before they kick off. But Baker, with his full complement of weapons there, could be devastating. He could throw 4 touchdowns any given week with all these weapons. Like, they are just so loaded in that position. Bucky Irving's back up against the Saints. This could be an absolute massacre. With these guys coming back, Secko, how do you feel about Emeka Egbuka? Not only for this week, but for the rest of the season?
Probably in the minority here, but I reckon it really actually helps Egbuka a lot. Because what's happening at the moment, whether you sort of realize it or not, he's being forced to play a position he doesn't really play that well. He doesn't excel at. It's called the X receiver, which is pretty much Mike Evans' role. It's the guy who stands the sort of widest in formation, and is supposed to win sort of one-on-one man coverage down the field. And he's great, but that's not really his strength. His strength is more someone who goes in motion, sort of either out of the slot or out of the Z formation or receiver spot. So it pretty much just means it gets him a lot more use his speed and quickness and ability to sort of separate a little bit better off the line and in motion. So what I think this does is Godwin goes back into the power slot role that he's been so good at for the last 2 or 3 years. Evans takes the X, the big guy outside, and takes the main cornerback. And then Egbuka is actually going to be able to move around and be more flexible and take that nickel corner or the slot corner. When they come off, if he's moving around, they usually come off the slot guy and take the guy moving because they're the most agile. So it's a lot of sort of analysis. And sorry if that's a little bit nerdy, but I think it's really going to help him because what we've seen is he's getting a high level of targets, but his catchable target rate is one of the lowest in the league. So Baker's forcing targets to him because he's the best player they've got, but they're not great looks because it's not in the right role. I think maybe a 10, 15% drop in targets, but better targets and in more dangerous positions, we'll see him have a better end of day result. So if you've got him, I know a lot of people are panicking on him at the moment. If you've got him, just hang on, watch what it's like. But he's definitely going to be playable over the next 4 weeks, if not every week, but at least a couple of times. I'm pretty confident with that.
I'm with you there. When Emeka Egbuka started hot to start off the season, it was with Mike Evans under center, and also Chris Godwin played a couple of games at the start too. So let's not forget Jane Reed, Matthew Golden for the Packers, both limited practices with these guys. So wait and see. Jaden Reed, he's missed the last 10 or so weeks. So it will be the first game back for him. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Secko, this is the final time we get to talk about it before that game tomorrow. Which way are you trending? I don't think he does play, personally, just because, like, I know this game is a must win, but if he's not fully fit, why jeopardize the rest of the season when they probably need to win out? So they've got a couple of guys there. Tesla, he could you could pencil him in for a touchdown. Of course, gamble responsibly. I know we both like that this week, but how do you feel about him, Amon-Ra St. Brown, for the matchup tomorrow?
I'd be shocked if he played. Yeah, he's the kind of guy who will push to play and actually will more often than not fight through it and play. He hasn't missed many games at all in his career. But even the words coming out of him yesterday were very different to the normal way he says it, and sort of he almost said it was out of his hands, which makes it sound like if that's the case, he'll sit. Obviously, watch. We'll know tomorrow. The good thing it's the first game of the week, so we'll know to make moves to sit him down. I think the good thing is it's 1 week. I think if the game was on Sunday, they'd probably push to play him, or he'd push to play a bit more. But that 3 less days just makes it a little bit tight. So yeah, I think you're right. Not risking him. If they win without him, or if he plays and goes down, re-aggravates, and then they win, they won't have him for the rest of the season because an ankle injury can become a serious problem if it's not ready to go. So yeah, look, we'll see. Hopefully, you've got other options. If you've got Amon-Ra, he's a massive hole to fill, but I think it's a good result for St. Brown owners to only likely miss the one game, not the 3 or 4.
That's injuries all out of the way for week 14 with all the news that we have currently at this point in time. If you do have any start sit questions, make sure to drop them in the comments. We'll be sure to get to them at the end of the show for you. If you've got a couple of dilemmas, we've got 4 teams on bye, so it is pretty tough here. And coming up, Secko, we've got our starts of the week, and let's just jump straight into it. I'll smack the hot guys drop, and we'll kick it off with the quarterback.
Pull over by this hot guy and let me out.
I'll let us off this week, Secko, and I'm an absolute sucker for picking someone in the first game of the week. Jared Goff will be my start of the week in that quarterback position. He's at home in a dome. He had 20 points last week up against the Packers when they looked pretty gross, especially losing Amon-Ra St. Brown. It didn't help those guys there, and they copped an L. You mentioned Dan Campbell off the loss. He's going to be wanting to get these guys firing. Really do like Isaac Tesla here for a touchdown. I know we mentioned that at the start. They've got some big weapons. I know they've got Amon-Ra potentially out. Brock Wright, the tight end, he's out. Khalif Raymond is also out for these guys. But the matchup is just so juicy against the Cowboys and in a dome when across this week over in the States, meant to be super windy, super snowy. So you don't love that for the quarterback position. But the Cowboys are the number 1 matchup for quarterbacks. They are allowing 25 or just over 25 fantasy points on average to this position week in, week out. Even with the depleted core, I think Goff can throw for 2 or even 3 touchdowns this week. Hopefully 2 go to our guy Tesla. That would be absolutely phenomenal. And even in here, the Cowboys, their defense against the run has been super stout the last few weeks since picking up Quinnen Williams. So I think the way to beat these guys is going to be through the air. And Jared Goff, the house cat he is at home, should be able to get it done for us this week.
I love it. I'm a big Goff guy. I traded for him. I said a couple of weeks ago, I traded for him in my main home league just to shore up the Jackson Dart I was rolling with and Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett has been great, but I just thought Jared Goff, this matchup was the reason why I wanted to get him. Make sure I locked up the highest playoff seeding. So yeah, I think it's massive. Obviously, Amon-Ra out is a slight downgrade, but I think he can just make up for it against this defense, especially. Cool.
Let's go.
Right. My quarterback of the week is Jordan Love. Now, I'm not a big Jordan Love guy. I never really have been. But but yeah, he's been playing. Last week alone was a massive week for him, a big step forward, and a bit of a change in the offensive philosophy for Matt LaFleur. So I think there's a big chance, in this game, we expect a fair bit of scoring. I do anyway. The over-under is not massive, but I think that's one to exploit if you want to gamble responsibly. I think these two teams have the ability. They've both been playing decent defense, but they're both very, very potent offenses at the moment, and can push the ball down the field, mostly with their legs. But I think this is the kind of game where the Bears may get up a little bit early, and Love's going to be forced to throw. Now, last 8 games against the Bears, if you take out horrible quarterbacks like JJ McCarthy, Mason Rudolph, and Tyler Huntley, I think that's fair to take them out of any equations. Bears are giving up 280 yards per game and almost 3 total touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks over the span since their bye. So that's where I expect that sort of line to be for Love. I think there's a massive chance it's a huge week for him. Love is averaging, in games. So another one is, I think it's going to be a high scoring game. And in that case, games where the Packers have given up more than 24 points, which is a fairly low bar. I think that's reasonable to think the Bears can get to that threshold. Love's averaging over 300 passing yards and 3.3 touchdowns per game in games where the Packers give up more than 24 points. Now, that's obviously, we don't know what the weather's like. This is going a little bit early. Lambeau can always be a little bit cold and chilly, but I don't think it's going to stop too much. Christian Watson's on fire. Dontayvion Wicks had his career game. They're making things work, I think, out of the backfield as well. I feel like Love is in a really good spot to have a really solid game, sort of 250 to 270 and multiple touchdowns is what I'm expecting as a bit of a floor from him against the Bears.
Love it. Even better if he does get Matthew Golden and Jaden Reed back this week. The more weapons, the better for that team. The system is super good there with Matt LaFleur. Just need Jordan Love firing, and it's a massive divisional matchup. No, it's a nice one there. Running backs. Ken Walker is my start of the week up against the Falcons. I love getting hurt. Been super high on Ken Walker the last couple of weeks, especially that Rams game in week 11. After that, the head coach has come out and said, you know what, Ken Walker deserves more touches. In my eyes, he looks like the far better back between him and Charbonnet. He's just been lagging a little bit behind in touches. They're still splitting it. Charbonnet in particular is getting that goal line work, which you absolutely hate. But the Falcons have been horrid against the run the last few weeks. They're ranked 23rd in fantasy points allowed to this position. On average, 22.4 points per game. Only takes one for Ken Walker. He's got that capability to rip one off for a long touchdown. I think this game's going to be a blowout. They're a massive favorite in Atlanta. All we need is a couple of things to go his way, and it's been going Charbonnet's way lately, but I think for Ken Walker, things can change for him this week, and that's where my money will be going.
Absolutely love that. I think he's the main guy going forward, and Charbonnet's going to get some, but they're so heavy on the run now. I think it doesn't matter, and it's a great matchup. My running back start of the week is Quinshon Judkins. Now, Quinshon, I've been a bit hot and cold with this guy, but you can't deny that he's the majority of their offense, regardless of who their quarterback is. At the moment, they realise that the most dangerous player on their offense is Quinshon, and it's pretty obvious to see why. He just pounds it. He gets lots of carries. He does a fair bit with them, and if you think back to that 3 touchdown game he had earlier in the season, it's definitely on the cards again this week. Against the Titans. Let's be honest, Titans don't really put up much of a fight. I feel like this is the kind of game could be a positive game script, which is rare for Cleveland. So we might see a lot, and no Dylan Sampson. So it's a massive one for Judkins. He won't come off the field much at all. They haven't really got anyone of note to spell him. So I feel like he's going to be in that 80, 85 plus snap percentage. And last week when Sampson went out, he got 3 catches after that injury, which he hasn't done a lot of. But it does add a little bit of more of an upside to your PPR or half PPR league. So, 3 or 4 catches, 100 yards, a touchdown or 2, very much all within the realms of possibility, especially if there's a bit of weather around in Cleveland, which there sometimes is. They might try and take the ball out of Shador's hands and just keep pounding it against a vulnerable Titans defense with Quinshon.
Browns are favourites in this game too, which we love to pick
Mm.
running backs that are a favourite in these matchups. Probably the first time in the last 6 weeks where they have been a favourite. So Judkins,
Mm.
I really do like him to score as well. I don't want to say that too much because, of course, you need to gamble responsibly. But I did just make note of that Judkins anytime. It's just too juicy up against the Titans. Absolute sucker for it. Wide receivers. And being an absolute sucker, I am an absolute sucker for pain. This guy has not done anything all year. Has probably been the biggest flop considering where you have drafted him. I saw him go as high as the back end of the second round. Some people were even taking him as a wide receiver 5 in leagues this year. Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had his first game back after missing the last 3 weeks. First game back against the Titans, 3.8 points. Absolutely horrid. Had 75% of the snaps. I think this is a massive bounce back spot for Brian Thomas in a game that it's a pretty high over under. I think it's 47.5, 48. We'll get to that later on. Sauce Gardner is out for the Colts. Secondary has been super beatable the last few weeks. I think Shadavius Ward, the other corner there, has also been a little bit banged up, but even still, everything is lining up for Brian Thomas in this one. It's a divisional game, a lot on the line. Parker Washington is out as well, or trending towards out with that hip injury, which he's been getting a lot of the work. Jacoby Myers, yes, he had a good game last week, but if you watch that one, it came off a massive and a monster block by BTJ that lined up Jacoby Myers to have an open lane to run in a score there. The talent's there, the athleticism's there. All we just need is to see some connection with Trevor Lawrence, and I think all it takes is one play with BTJ, and he's going to have a monster week. So it's a hard one. It's a tough one to try and swallow, considering he really hasn't given you anything besides a 19-point game in week 6. But things are lining up, and I think they're going to need BTJ down the stretch. So hopefully they can give him a little bit more, work him in the rotation now that he's an extra week returned from that injury.
Yeah, I think it's a bold call. People are going to come for you in the comments, no doubt, no doubt about
Let me
that.
know.
Yeah, but let Mal know, because he'll let you know when Thomas has a big one. I think it's a good call. If he's ever going to do it, it's going to be now. I just had a look. I had Brian Thomas as wide receiver 7 in my preseason rankings. So I'm as I got it as wrong as everyone else. It was it looked like a pretty good spot, but yeah, it's crazy how bad he's gone. But good thing about fantasy is nothing's ever dead and buried. The situation lines up pretty well, I think, with Parker Washington out. So I think we're on a good track there, and hopefully for your sake he dominates.
Fingers
My
crossed.
wide receiver, absolutely. My wide receiver, start of the week. I'm going with a stack. I'm going with Christian Watson to go with my Jordan Love quarterback start of the week. This guy's been trending really, really well. He's had 17 targets the last 2 weeks. He's had 18 plus PPR points in 2 of his last 3. Since he's sort of been back fully in with Love, with the full sort of complement of everyone, he's really done some big things. He's clear number 1 receiver on the team. There's no dispute about that anymore. Dobbs is a good little Robin to his Batman, and obviously you got Wicks and then Reed potentially coming back. But since Kraft's been out, they've been sort of just aching for someone to be a reliable target, and he stepped up. They're playing the Bears, which is a great matchup. They're a top 10 matchup for points against wide receivers. 14 wide receivers have scored more than 13 PPR fantasy points against the Bears this year. I think that's just the game. I think that's just what's going to happen. It's going to be Love and Watson. I think he's really good for a big game. He's due for a big one, and they do have good corners, but their slot corner is the best one. So Kyler Gordon, I feel like they can get Watson with his field stretching ability to dominate. So I'm big on Christian Watson. If you've got him in fantasy, I think you can start him with a fair level of confidence.
Should be plenty of points in this game too. Like the call, riding the hot hand. Watson went absolutely nuclear last week. Gave us a good taste of what he can do after coming back from injury. He's a clear number 1 target there. It's a good one there. 2 in the nice little stack, even juicier. Something that's not as juicy. People probably think I'm taking the piss. I'm not. Cole Pitts is my tight end start of the week. There's probably 10% for the vibes, 90% because I just love the matchup. It's a pretty gross week all in all for tight ends besides those top guys. So trying to find a guy that I'm happy to start. in a week where we're missing George Kittle, we're missing Hunter Henry, we're missing Theo Johnson. All pretty decent options there. Kyle Pitts, we mentioned Drake London's probably going to miss another week with that hamstring injury. Kyle Pitts had 8 targets last week, caught 7 of them for 82 yards. If he can do that again, I'm not trying to just chase last week's stats, but 15 points in a half PPR for tight ends. You take that any given week with how gross this position is. Even better, the Seahawks are the 29th best defense in fantasy points allowed to that tight end position, allowing about 13.4 on average. So these guys are at home in a dome. I know it's Kirk Cousins, but the weather isn't going to ruin anything for us here. So they will still be more than capable of passing in this one. Kyle Pitts is the number 1 or probably number 2 target behind Bijan. But even still, there's nothing else really in that receiving game. So hoping that he can have a big one here against the Seahawks. That's my play for tight end this week.
I think if London's out, it's a smash play. Even if London's back, I don't think it's not the worst play. Pitts is. We all know you love Pitts, so you don't have to sell us on that. But yeah, he showed last week he's still capable, and Cousins is that kind of quarterback that can use someone like Pitts and just take the easy throws when they come. My tight end is a little bit better, a little bit younger. It's hard to be younger than Kyle Pitts. He's still only about 23 or 4, I think. He's been around for a while. Mine's Tyler Warren, and this guy would have been a bit of a layup start of the week, even as recently as sort of 3 or 4 weeks ago. But sort of some mediocre performances coinciding with the Colts sort of dropping off a bit. They've lost, I think, 3 in a row or 3 of the last 4. This is a confidence play on Tyler Warren. If you've got him, don't look to sort of start your streamers. You can put Tyler Warren back in with confidence in your fantasy lineups. It's because the Jags give up the second most points to tight ends, second most fantasy points to tight ends. Funnily enough, they are 5. Let me just check it. 5.4 points per game, like less than the most, and that's Cincinnati. Cincinnati give up almost a touchdown more of fantasy points per game to the tight end. So they back to what we said at the start. They're clearing away the best matchup, but the Jags are second, and that's what you want. You want to sort of tight end is very much a position where you can play your matchups. You can target the defenses that give up a lot, because the reason why is because their defense is open around that middle, those intermediate throws across the middle, which is where tight ends get a lot of catches. So Tyler Warren's exactly that. Daniel Jones, broken leg, will want to get it out quickly. They do have a decent pass rush, which again is why the tight ends do really well against them, because you have to get it out quick. They're usually the guys who are closest to the line and able to get sort of chunk plays after. So this guy's great at that. Last week, tight ends had 35% of the team targets and 37% of the team yards against the Jags. That was for the Titans. They haven't got much to write home about, but still they dominated, and that's happened a lot of weeks where the majority of the targets, or the most targets for the team, has gone to the tight end. Since the bye, the Jags have given up, and on average, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 70 yards, and almost a touchdown per game to tight ends. But Tyler Warren's probably the best they've played in that stretch as well, or he's definitely up there, most talented. I feel like that's very much in play. And if he does that, if he gets 70 and a touchdown, he's a top 2 or 3 tight end every week. So 100%, if you've got Warren, I know it's been a little bit hard with him and the Colts, but you can play him this week against the Jags matchup, which is an absolute smash.
An absolute smash indeed. And you definitely do want pieces in this game too. I feel like this game is also in a dome divisional matchup. The over-under, I think, is sitting at 48, but I don't mind this to go over. And Tyler Warren, great matchup for tight ends. With this one up against the Jags, my defense, will run through these guys a bit quicker before we get to our Week 14 preview. I'm taking the Ravens in a divisional matchup up against the Steelers. They're going to come out fiery after that loss against the Bengals in another divisional matchup where they were heavy favorites. I think the Ravens are definitely getting healthy. We've seen it the last 4 or 5 weeks. What they've looked like down that stretch has been night and day to what they've looked like at the start of the year. Getting healthy, more weeks removed from the bye, at home. And the main selling point for this is the Steelers' offense looks trash at the moment. It looks garbage. It's the running game. That's it. Aaron Rodgers does not look good whatsoever. DK Metcalf has been non-existent for the most part. So I like the Ravens to really get after the quarterback and Aaron Rodgers in this game up against the Steelers.
Love that. Rodgers hasn't been the same since he hurt his wrist, and they're very easy to beat up on. I think at the moment we saw it last week. My defense, DST start of the week is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A pretty easy one, I think. The Saints, they're playing the Saints this week in Tampa. The Saints have been better than sort of we thought the last few weeks. I feel like this is all the makings of an absolute beatdown. The Bucs getting back to full fitness. Bucky back to his a full snap share. I feel like they're just going to run all over them. And I feel like the Saints are going to have to pass to try and catch up. And that's where fantasy points come from with these defenses. So employed 16 implied point total for the Saints. I feel like you can take the under on that. Keep them under 14 points, 4 or 5 sacks, a couple of turnovers. That's the kind of recipe I see. There's every chance this could be a shutout. And I'm going to be bold and call the final score to be 30-0 in favor of the Bucs and have an absolute monster DST day.
Could be a shutout. Don't mind that at all. I was thinking I like the Bucs to cover in this one. I know the line. I think it's at like 8 or something like that. But
8.5, yeah. Yeah.
Hey, if they cover by 30, absolutely they'll have an absolute monster day. Those are our starts of the week. Go big on the line. Those are our starts of the week for week 14. We'll see how this plays out when it's all said and done on Monday, when it's all finished up. Week 14 preview, Secko. Let's get straight into it.
Let's preview the games for the week ahead. It's time for game talk.
We touched on this one a little bit at the start. Cowboys heading to Detroit to take on the Lions. The Lions are a field goal favorite in the biggest implied point total of the week at 54.5. Thursday night football to kick off the week. We are absolutely spoiled. You really start everybody, Secko. I mean, in this game, like, how do you kind of see it going? I think Jahmyr Gibbs, I know you're going to start him no matter what, but with Amon-Ra potentially being out, he's going to get so much work in that receiving game, boosting up his floor. We saw what Jamo could do without Amon-Ra last week. We both like Tesla to get there. How do you feel about David Montgomery? He's probably the only question mark in this game for the Lions.
Yeah, he is. It's a strange one because this year he's been very different to every other year he's played in this setup. It's been a very clear and obvious shift to Gibbs getting all the majority of the work. He's dominating the snap share, which he hasn't really done in the past. But what Monty does do is pop up seemingly out of nowhere from time to time, and when he does it, it's usually touchdown based. But he can have those games. He had a couple of games this year where he just had pretty much just monsters when no one really expected it much. And sort of what felt like a Gibbs game ended up being a Monty game where he just sort of took over and got all the sort of short goal lines. He had 2 touchdowns in week 3. He's had 3 or 4 other touchdowns every sort of second or third game. So it's hard to trust him. But the Cowboys are the kind of team where the ball's going to be down their end of the field a lot, I feel. Again, if Tesla takes a big catch and gets dragged down to the 1 for his second touchdown, I'll be livid. But Montgomery will probably get the crunch in from the 1, and that's what you really need from him. Not a strong start by any means, but definitely someone in a high-scoring game with 29 implied points who can definitely go 60 and a touchdown to have a sort of decent PPR kind of floor or non-PPR floor, but he may even get a catch or 2 as well.
I know we're pretty early in this, Secko, going through these week 14 games, but David Montgomery or Zay Flowers this week?
Montgomery. The answer's Zay Flowers this week, and the reason why is because his quarterback's going to have 30 plus. So Zay Flowers is a good matchup this week for the Ravens, and I could play this game all day, that. But against the Steelers, I think Zay Flowers actually does have a good game. No touchdowns, just letting you know that. But he'll have 8 catches for 80, which probably should beat Monty's day out in PPR.
Had to throw that out there and just test it early on for the Cowboys. Secko, really, I mean, Dak's playing like you mentioned at the start. He's playing at an MVP level at the moment, but just that team win just hasn't been there so far this year. CeeDee Lamb's going to go massive in this one. George Pickens in turn. The Lions are hurt in that secondary. Javonte Williams, you start him. Good chance he gets a touchdown and a massive over-under. Jake Ferg, how are you feeling about him in this one? And that's probably really anything that we need to question.
Yeah, he's probably the only borderline or decision, if you will. Yeah, last week against the Lions, Theo Johnson, 77 yards. They do give up points. They give up touches to everyone. They're pretty generous. They've been a pretty generous what do you call them? Defense to all positions, especially ones that can throw the ball on them. They're not the strongest passing defense or defense against the pass. So I'm fully prepared to see all these guys really have a game. Jake Ferguson probably needs a touchdown. If he gets a touchdown last week, he was only out by a millimeter. If he gets a touchdown last week, we probably think of him a little bit differently, and that's how fickle fantasy can be, especially tight ends. They are mostly touchdown or bust. But I think there's a real chance that I'd start Javonte and I'd start Ferguson over probably anything but 6 or 7 tight ends. Obviously know who they are. You would start them over Ferguson anyway. But outside that, I'd start him over all of those fringe guys or streamers. Like, strange is a decision, but Jawan Johnson, I'd start him over. Kincaid's pretty tough as well. I'd probably still start Ferguson just with the injury, but yeah, he's in that situation anyway.
Moving on to the first game of Sunday Night Football, early Monday morning for us here. The Bengals taking on the Bills. Massive AFC game here. Bills are 5.5-point favorites at home, and this total is the second biggest that we have for the week in terms of implied points. 53.5. Very blessed to kick off the week with these two bangers of a game, but how do you see this one really playing out? I mean, Joey B did look good in his return. Didn't really look too rusty there. Of course, it's hard to look rusty when you've got Jamar Chase, just an absolute stud that you can throw the ball to. But if T. Higgins doesn't play in this game, I think it probably will. And of course, I need to be biased because I'm a Bills fan, but I already see it being as a Bills win for these guys. Without T. Higgins, I think that is a big loss. It's going to be at Bills. Probably going to be snowing in this game here, so I can see the running backs getting utilized heavily in this one. Is there any real question marks that you have? I know, like, if T. Higgins doesn't play, how do you feel about Yoshivas? How do you feel about Gesicki? A lot of questions to be asked in this massive point total that we have.
Yeah, there is, and look, the Bills get almost 30 points implied here, which is massive. It's going to come predominantly from a couple of guys, and maybe Kincaid if he plays, and an obligatory touchdown to some random receiver. But yeah, the Bengals side is definitely the talking point. Gesicki I actually like as a play. He's a bit of a dart throw. If you're a bit of an underdog and you're going with sort of a so-so tight end, you could definitely have a shot at Gesicki if you need a sort of win to get in. He could do absolutely nothing, but he could definitely pop up. He looked pretty good last week. And other than that, if Higgins doesn't play, I really don't want to trust Yoshivas. He had 1 catch last week, I think, saved by the touchdown, 2 catches, saved by the touchdown. And then you've got Mitchell Tinsley, heap of targets, can't catch the ball, isn't very talented. And then there's really no one. It's sort of going to be Chase Brown. I love Chase Brown in this position. I think he'd be a top 5 guy for me this week. And Jamar Chase is arguably the best wide receiver in the league. Some would say he is, but he's in the top 2 or 3. And Burrow looks to be back to his best. So I think it's going to be a shootout. I love that it's 54-point over under, and looking forward to waking up and watching a lot of this game because I think it's going to be huge.
It's going to be a massive one. I think the Bills definitely do need to win this one a little bit more, considering their playoff hopes. Definitely more likely to make it over the Bengals. The receivers in this one, we know James Cook is a gun. We know Josh Allen's a stud. If Kincaid misses out, are you interested in the tight ends at all? In Dawson Knox, Jackson Hawes, it is the best matchup for these guys. Could take, all it takes is one kind of touchdown and you're kind of happy, but I feel like there is plenty of other options that you probably could lean on instead of kind of guessing if it is going to be Knox or Hawes. And then even on top of that, Secko, the wide receivers, Khalil Shakir, he's been probably the most steady, but I mean, Keon Coleman got a touchdown last week, which when he's had the last prior weeks as a healthy scratch. So it's hard to pick the receivers for the Bills. And yeah, I'll leave that up to you to try and decipher.
Yeah, well, it's impossible. Brandon Cooks is there now. It's Brandon Cooks there. Brandon Cooks is there now.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
Yeah, they've still got Curtis Samuel, and they've got the who's who of All Star Weekend in 2017. It's just impossible to trust any of them. Shakir's okay. He's been on rosters. He's been on my roster a couple of times this year, different rosters, and I just never want to play him. If you're in a PPR league, he's just that safe. He's that safe floor guy. He's probably 8 to 12 points most weeks, but it's just not very fun. And then the rest of it's just potluck. So I don't know. Dawson Knox, I suppose. And you don't need to start him just because he's playing against the Bengals. I don't think you need to start. Go bargain barrel dumpster diving for Dawson Knox just if Kincaid's out. I think Kincaid plays though, and he's a strong start. So him and Cook and no one else in that in the skill positions.
I'm with you there. Moving on, another massive game here, the Colts and the Jags. Colts are 1.5-point favorites, 47.5 total points in this one. I think you could probably nearly start everybody. I mean, not Josh Downs, I'm not really counting him as a player in this one, but I think Pittman will be fine. Danny Dimes should be fine in a bounce back spot. JT should open up things for this receiving game, and Jags are a bit more friendlier against the run compared to the Chiefs from a couple of weeks ago there. Any real hesitation from the Colts, Secko? I know you love Tyler Warren, but Michael Pittman and I will loop in Josh Downs or even Alec Pierce. How do you feel about those guys? I feel like probably Alec Pierce over Downs, but how do you see it in this one?
It's definitely Alec Pierce over Downs. Downs could have a big game, but I wouldn't want to trust it. I think Jonathan Taylor absolutely gets off the chain here. He's well overdue. He needs to firm back up in the offensive player of the year betting market. He was $1.10 favorite at one stage. He's not even favorite anymore. He's going to really want to come out and do his best. So JT is just get prepared for a really big one before a tough one next week and after. But yeah, Pittman I think you can trust again and Warren. But yeah, Pierce I would play in a pinch. The Jags aren't really simple against the deep ball. They're actually quite good at defending the downfield passing game. So obviously Daniel Jones should be sort of benched for forever. His leg won't heal by itself. So probably not an option. He won't run anymore. Takes away his sort of upside there. So it's a pretty condensed starting lineup for me on the Colts.
For the Jags, we do like the Colts as a beatable defense in that secondary. So we like Trevor Lawrence. He's been very solid last few weeks in a must-win spot. I like Brian Thomas Jr. He's my start of the week. I think you can roll out Jacoby Myers as well in a high implied point total, and the running backs as well. Secko, Travis Etienne. If you're in an absolute pinch with all the teams on bye, Tootin, he has found himself just to weasel in and get a touchdown in a lot of these games. How do you feel about it on the Jags side of the ball for this one? Also, Brenton Strange as a good option at tight end, I think, this week in another exploitable matchup.
Yeah, Strange has been Strange is definitely startable. He's in that sort of cluster I've said a few times behind the sort of top 6 or 7. But definitely, every week now he's putting up consistent numbers. I think Jacoby Myers is especially with Parker Washington out now, is taking over in that role. He's exactly the perfect fit for Lawrence's skill set, for Cohen's play calling as well. And I think Etienne's a really strong start again. It's a bit annoying that Tootin looks to have taken the goal line role, but Etienne can do it with his hands as well as with his feet on the ground. So I think you start him with confidence. Brian Thomas I think is a great start. You got to put your steel undies on, but you'll be you'll be happy to watch that when he does go off. And I think it's going to be a good game to watch. Should be very high scoring. It could be one of those ones that is 35-34 in the last game going in the first slate.
Going to be a monster. One that probably won't be a monster is the Dolphins heading to New York to take on the Jets. The Finns are a field goal favorite. Totals are low, 41.5. It's okay. Definitely not the lowest that we have on this week, but Devon Achane, you're going to start him no matter what. He's going to get everything. Surprising, I don't think he had a reception last week for their game, which is just very, very surprising. And before I put my name to that, no, he had one target. He had 134 yards on the ground and a touchdown. So that's the first time all year that he hasn't had a catch. So you wouldn't expect that to repeat. Jalen Waddle, big bounce back. In turn, Tua, you like him. I don't mind Darren Waller in this game. Also, Secko, if you're looking for a spot start. And on the Jets, Tyrod Taylor, if you need a spot start at quarterback, he added some rushing production. We don't mind. Breece Hall in a good matchup. You like that. How do you feel about the receivers for the Jets? I feel like that's probably the only question. Adonai Mitchell, John Mechie. Had a good week of John Mechie, then a quiet week, and in turn, Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell had a good week last week here. So how do you see them playing out against the Dolphins in this one?
I feel like there's a chance it's going to be a bit like that. It's going to be a bit up and down. They're both they're very different receivers, but yeah, Mechie had the better game the week before, and then Mitchell's popped up. I don't think he's been the hot waiver wire guy, Mitchell. I don't think you can trust him. I don't think you really want to be putting him in your lineup. Could very easily just be back to sort of like Mechie had last week, 4 for 19, and it could be complete reversal. But could also be wrong. He could have shown that he actually is the main guy. He does beat guys really well down the field. So if Tyrod's on, and the weather looks like it's going to be all right as well in New York, which is good for a change. We'll actually make this game a bit more competitive because Tua won't be having to deal with snow or rain as much as he hates doing that. So it's gonna be a good game. I probably would I would start Mitchell over Mechie, but I really wouldn't want to start either of them. And then obviously Breece is a smash start.
How about in the next game, Secko? We've got the Saints taking on the Bucks. Bucks are a massive 8.5-point favorite, 42.5-point total. For the Saints, we saw Devon Vele emerge, 8 catches, I think 80-odd yards and a score last week. Would you rather start him over the New York receivers to kick things off in this game?
No, because they won't score any points.
Very true.
Oh, yeah, it's hard. It's hard because I remember at the time they traded 2 picks to Denver for Vele, who was a 25-year-old rookie who really hadn't done much, and at the time it was laughed at as the worst trade in history. And he takes a bit of time to get there, and he has 8 targets, 8 catches, 93 and a touchdown. I just don't know if it's sort of in a similar way of AD Mitchell. I don't know if you can trust it to happen again. I think in this offense, you can only trust 2 pieces, and that's Olave and Johnson. Johnson gets a lot of targets, doesn't do a lot with them. So he's probably a PPR only play. But I think Olave is the one who's going to benefit the most from Vele actually showing something. Because he should get a lot more single looks than he's been having, keep those high target numbers. And Shuck's been a lot better than we thought he'd be, and for a few weeks now. But still think in this game against the Bucks in Tampa Bay, it might be a bit of a rough outing.
A rough outing there. Tyler Shuck, we mentioned in our waiver wire, the Bucks have been pretty beatable against the pass. Probably going to have a turnover in this one, you think, but he could throw 2 he might throw 2 touchdowns. That is there. You've got them to not score. He could be an option there. I'd rather start Tyrod Taylor in up against Miami over Tyler Shuck for sure. Chris Olave, he's the number 1. You're going to start him. Devin Neal, Secko, temperature check on him. He does get involved in that passing game, so I think only in a PPR I'll be willing to play him if I had to. You could do a lot worse this week. But I mean, besides that, Juwan Johnson, you can kind of throw him in the mix. But yeah, it's a tough one against the Bucks when they're a massive 8.5-point underdog.
The problem with Devin Neal is he's not very efficient as a runner, and I don't think this is going to be the kind of game script where they can run him, 15 plus times as well. So he's going to have to get a lot of work out of the backfield, and it's probably just not. It's not a strong start. He's probably in that sort of RB3 flex kind of range. You may have to start him if you've got CMC out and Tracy's injured. You got Dowdle, you got Chuba. You got a lot of guys on bye this week, so you may be forced into it a bit. It's fine. He can go off. Tampa Bay are beatable through the air as a running back, especially. So yeah, absolutely startable. But I wouldn't be rushing to pick him up to play him this week.
And for the Bucks, Baker, Bucky, and Mecca, no doubt. we won't really touch on Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan just because, we don't know yet. So we'll act as if they're not there. But Chris Godwin, second game back from injury, 66% of the snaps this week after 36 the week before. They're ramping him up. He looks good. The more game time he's going to get. How do you feel about him in this one? I know a couple of people I know in leagues that I'm in, they were able to pick him up off waivers last week. So you'd be pretty happy with that. How do you feel about him in this one, even rest of season? How do you feel him coming along?
Yeah, I think he's back to that slot role, and with their remaining schedule, he could be a really good acquisition. While everyone sort of is worried about Evans, which could be good as well, but Godwin could be just set up. He's lost a step. I think it's pretty noticeable. He's not as good as he was last year before the injury, which is not surprisable given it was the broken leg. I think it was broken leg.
Yeah, I think maybe compound ankle
it
fracture or something like that. Yeah, it
looked
nasty.
terrific. It was multiple breaks. Yeah, multiple breaks. So not surprising he's not 100% and not himself, but very exploitable defenses. I think Godwin can actually be a strong start this week against the Saints D, but going forward, I think there's a chance that the Bucks get into this 2024 scoring bonanza like they were last year, and it's going off the chain with all the pieces back, and Bucky moving the ball down the field with Baker, who's another week removed from that shoulder, which can only be a good thing.
Godwin was the wide receiver 1 in points per game, I believe, at one point last year too, before that injury, ahead of Chase as well. So I love it. I love the call. He could be a massive league winner down the stretch. In the next game that we have, another banger. We just banger after banger this week, even with 4 teams on bye. Steelers taking on the Ravens in Baltimore. Ravens are 6-point favorites, 42.5 total points. For the Steelers, Jaylen Warren, that's probably the only person that I'm comfortable starting. I thought Kenneth Gainwell might have been able to do a little bit last week, but didn't really give us too much in a plus matchup against the run up against the Bills, even though they did get flogged in that one. But Jaylen Warren for the Steelers, probably the only one. Secko for the Ravens. We don't need to go through these guys as much. We've bagged on this enough, but we like Lamar in this game. Must win.
Not Lamar.
Yeah. Start Lamar. Zay Flowers. You don't want him to start in this game. Derrick Henry, when it gets cold, Derrick Henry comes to town. He performs better. The Yeti. The tight ends. We saw Mark Andrews recently sign a 3-year extension with the Ravens, which was surprising. We thought, it was going to be the likely extension at the start of the year, but that likely injury kind of derailed things for him. But any real hesitation in this game between the Steelers and the Ravens? Do you like Andrews more? Do you like Likely? Is there anybody else that you kind of like to start in this one?
I would have liked Likely a lot more before the signing. I feel like that sort of shows a bit of an intent that he's not going anywhere. I always thought this year, and that's why I was so big on Likely, because I thought they would wind Andrews down, essentially to be to let him go at the end of the year. With that signing, it probably changes the things, and he's probably a great play next week if you got him against Cincinnati. But I think they're both playable. It's Steelers have been a pretty ordinary defense of late. They're very easy to beat. I think Lamar's going to need them. He hasn't got the wide receivers. It's very documented. His wide receiver core is probably a bit unders at the moment. So I think he's going to lean heavily on these two. And I feel like they could both be startable in a soft week at home against the Steelers.
Moving on, Seahawks taking on the Falcons. Seahawks are a touchdown favorite in Atlanta. 44.5 total points. It's a bit juicy. Seahawks, JSN. I like Kenneth Walker. Probably going to roll out Sam Darnold as well in that game. That's probably the end of list on that side of the ball. Probably similar thing for the Falcons. Secko. Cole Pitts, my start of the week. Really do like him in this matchup. Bijan. Really anybody else that you want to mention in this game?
Darnell Mooney was disappointing with no London last week. He was losing targets to guys like David Sills and like just these no-name dudes who are popping up and getting plenty of work. If you can't dominate, in a matchup against the Jets of all teams with no London, I think his sort of career is almost at a crossroads or gone. There's no one else startable on that team. Algier in an absolute pinch, but it's against the Seahawks, so I don't think they're going to be scoring very many. This is a bit of a nothing game. JSN are absolutely ballistic, though.
And you can pretty much move on at that point. Titans and the Brown, the lowest point total of the week, 34-point total. Browns, as I mentioned, they're a 4-point favorite at home. I actually don't mind Shador as a spot start this week. As crazy as that sounds, if you've got Purdy, Burrow, Dart, if you are itching for quarterback, probably just in that super flex format, don't mind Shador as a favorite against the Titans in this one. Quinton Judkins, your start of the week, no doubt. Think you can probably hold off on any of the receivers. Shador's kind of been spreading it around, which we don't love for the Browns. And for the Titans, anybody there? Secko, we've seen Shamere, DK really pop off more so in the special teams and the punt returning field, but nobody else really sticks out as a start in the Titans for me.
Now, DK is actually leading the NFL in all-purpose yards. Usually it goes to a running back, but this year he's getting so much because of the kicking rules as well. No, look, the Titans are they're just so bad to watch. They're doing nothing. They've somehow gotten worse since Callahan's been fired. I'm not sure how that's possible. They've had no little bump. Their running backs is disgusting. It should be 100% Spears, but they're still using Pollard. The tight ends are sort of okay, but there's two of them, so everything's split down the middle. And Cam Ward's just not there yet. So they have to hope that that someone wants a quarterback really, really bad next year, and they can sell the farm to get them because they need a lot of pieces to help them. So yeah, no one on the Titans. It's going to be snowing. It's going to be below zero. The chance is going to be sort of snow coming in sideways as well. They've got to put a dome on that Cleveland. Like, it's so bad. Even if it's not snowing weather yet, it's pissing down or blowing a gale sideways. They've just got to either move the team, probably the best thing to do, move them again, second time in their history, or just put a roof on it because it's just so, like, 34 total points is embarrassing.
Massive game for Judkins in that one. Yeah, he's going to go off.
Yeah.
Commanders and the Vikings are going on next. Vikings are 2-point favorites at home, 42 total for the Commanders. Again, it's hard. We don't know if it's going to be Jaden Daniels or Mariota. Probably will be Mariota for another week. You'd think if that is the case, probably start Mariota in this one. He's been okay. He gives you rushing floor. Vikings have been pretty beatable for the most of the last few weeks. The running game, really Chris Rodriguez. If you're in a pinch, you can't start any of the other guys. Hope Rodriguez gets you a touchdown. Receivers, Secko, Zach Ertz went off last week. I think he had 10 targets for 80 yards or something like that. Terry McLaurin, his first game back, went off. Deebo Samuel kind of lagged. I think they went to OT or later in that game. He was the only got points late in that game. But for the Commanders, any people that you're looking to sit in that one with Mariota under center, we think?
It's a tough game. The Vikings have been not great, but last week they game planned to take Seattle out. Sam Darnold was rubbish. It was covered by the fact that the guy on the other side was worse, I think, but he only had 140 yards, 30 dropbacks, which is not nothing for him. It's actually a pretty decent number. Highly inefficient, was just pretty ordinary. Sacked, I think, 4 or 5 times. So I'm in a sort of place in Minnesota off a short week for Commanders. They played a bit of a slog into Monday Night Football as well, and then having to travel. So this could be the kind of game where it's sit everyone. It sounds weird, but I wouldn't want to start Mariota. Wouldn't want to start the running backs. I wouldn't really want to start Terry that much, given they took out JSN last week very easily. And then the Vikings, you can't start anyone. So, yeah, I'm interested to watch what JJ does. Hopefully, for his sake and fantasy sake in general, he takes the week off, bit Bryce Young-esque from last year, and something happens, get him back better. But he already tried it once, didn't work. So I'm not expecting much. But I think Justin Jefferson's a sit. It sounds wrong, but I don't know how you can start him after. Well, if you own him, you've had him for at least a month. If you acquired him at the deadline, you brave or silly, one of the two. But you've watched enough of it to know that it's just a very, very hard watch and very hard start. You can get better outcomes from, Vele and Adonai Mitchell, and that's gross.
Very hard to trust anyone on the Vikings. If Aaron Jones does miss this one, I don't mind Jordan Mason as a little start because I think they're just going to – I know it's tough, but they're just going to – in my eyes, you can't give the ball to JJ McCarthy to throw because he's just not going to make any throws. Justin Jefferson or Isaac Tesla this week, Secko?
Isaac, easy.
Yeah,
Easy.
I'm the same. I've got to make that decision in a couple of
I think he gets more.
too.
He gets as many targets. He probably gets the same amount of targets, but they're all going to be Jared Goff targets versus JJ McCarthy targets. Plus, he's more likely to catch a touchdown from Jared Goff throwing in the ball. So I think that's a pretty safe one for me. If you can pick him up and start him over Jefferson, go do it now.
Yeah, wait and see. We can't start any Vikings until JJ shows us just something, just a little glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
The next game, Broncos and the Raiders, another divisional. This is kicking off the later Monday morning slate, either 7 or 8 a.m. here, depending on if you're north or south here in Australia. Broncos are just over a touchdown favorite, 40-point total. For the Raiders, Genty, it is a tough matchup against the Broncos, but he's going to be getting so much work in that receiving game. He could see 8 targets again. In PPR, you take that as a nice floor. Could fall in the end zone. Brock Bowers didn't do too much against the Broncos when they played a few weeks back, maybe 4 or 5 weeks back. That was when Chip Kelly was still under center. I think in this game, Brock Bowers will be more than fine. You're not going to sit him, especially given that tight end landscape. Don't even think about starting Geno Smith. I'd rather start Shedeur Sanders than Geno Smith, as terrible as that sounds. For the Broncos, Secko, RJ Harvey had a good game last week. Coming off that bye, he started to get more work. Had a touchdown or 2 in that game off memory. Cortland Sutton started getting more work as well. I think he had 60 yards and a score. How do you feel about it for the Broncos side of the ball in this game? Don't really think there's much else to talk about on the Raiders.
Oh, there's not. You're probably starting Genty if you've got him. He's in that sort of in that Jaylen Warren territory for me. I'd probably start Jaylen Warren over him, but that's about where I would. Going to be sort of low efficiency, probably high. In PPR, it's probably Genty's side because of Gainwell's work there. But yeah, look, I think the Broncos receiving area, it's funny, Evan Ingram had his first game ever. Cortland Sutton got a touchdown. It's pretty clear now that Troy Franklin's taken a back seat. People were saying he was the new number 1 in town. I think he's actually the number 3 in town. I think Pat Bryant's even passed him. At the moment, he's looking better, getting lots of. He had the most targets besides Ingram last week. So Pat Bryant's actually a weird, sneaky start if you need a boom player. This is the right kind of matchup against the Raiders. But I'd start Sutton. I'd start RJ Harvey. I'd definitely start Bo Nix because it should be pretty easy against the Raiders.
Another divisional game in this later Monday morning slate. The Bears heading to Green Bay to take on the Packers. Jordan Love, Christian Watson, your starts of the week for the Packers side of the ball. We love them in a 44.5 total point. Packers are just under a touchdown favorite. I think Josh Jacobs can have a big game too, an extra week removed from that injury. Hopefully they get off to a lead and they can just keep running the ball down the throats of the Bears. Wouldn't really play around with anyone outside of that. Dobbs, Golden, Reed. Even if Reed and Golden start, you wouldn't really touch that at this point. For the Bears, Secko, the running backs, they've absolutely destroyed Eagles last week. DeAndre Swift and Coleman Ongai. How do you feel about those two to kick things off? And also, the biggest question that we have is probably Rome Odunze as well.
Yeah, I could speak about Rome for hours, and we'd be here a long time. He's still the clear target leader. He's still the best player in that team. It's infuriating that they've decided to they're winning games. So what they're doing is working, which is sort of vindicating a little bit of Caleb Williams' performance. 47% completion rate last week. He's at 58% on the season. I think Rome Odunze since week 8, catchable target rate's been under 33%. So that means 2 out of every 3 targets coming his way are uncatchable. It's just not good enough. It's easy to blame the guy, the player. Nothing's really changed other than Caleb Williams, a massive decline in his efficiency. So rightfully, they're going away from the pass a bit. They're winning games on the ground. We saw last week 40 carries, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns between the 2 running backs. I think you just started both. I think Green Bay is a lot harder, but they're using them so much. It almost seems like it's the entirety of their offense. And I think they pass it more this week. I think they have to pass it more this week, but I still feel like both of them are going to be involved a lot. Not strong starts by any means, but if you've got either, I think you can start either of those two in a bye week like this.
I think Colson Loveland, you can start in this one too. I think that middle area of the field could be a nice little play if you don't have better options there. Another divisional game, Secko and your Rams heading to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. They are 8-point favorites, 47.5 total points, so plenty there. I have a feeling this is a massive Puka game after he's been pretty quiet the last few weeks. Feels like that spot. How do you feel about the running backs? There was talks. Sean McVay came out, I think it was today or yesterday. He wants to kind of keep Kyron rested for that playoff stretch home. How do you think that's going to play out? Do you think he's going to split the carries 50-50 between him and Kyron? We know Kyron's looked pretty good the last couple of weeks, doing well on limited touches, finding his way into the end zone. Those running backs for you for the Rams, how do you feel?
It's hard to line up. I heard those comments and I was actually a little bit surprised. Not surprised, but just I didn't think McVay would come and actually say it. Thought he might just keep doing what he's been doing because Blake Corum has had, 7, 7, 8, 13, 13, 12 carries the last 6 weeks. That's very solid. Last week he had 81 yards and a touchdown. Kyron missed a bit of time, but when Kyron came back on, Corum still had touches after that. So he is very much involved. And I feel like there's a chance down the stretch. This week, not so much, but this week I think it'll be a pretty even split because they'll probably be up. I hope they'll be up. After last week's loss, I think they'll build a lead early. And then in which case, true to McVay's words, they'll probably try and just ease down Kyron and let Corum run out the game. And that's the kind of spots where he can go off. So, deep leagues, flex option, bye week replacement. Corum, there's worse options out there. But what he is, he's a fantastic handcuff. If Kyron does get injured at all, this guy's going to be better than Kyron because he doesn't have to share with anyone. There's no one else behind him. So if you are in the playoffs, consider dropping someone. Drop if you've got Khalil Shakir and you're not going to, and he's your sort of fifth wide receiver, drop him for Blake Corum. This guy could be a lottery ticket in a league, in a season that's pretty hard to get standout running backs. Blake Corum could be it. But yeah, to your question, I think Kyron's fine. I think they're going to score enough this week. They're going to score enough most weeks for him to get his. But it is going to be a bit of an ugly split more often than not over the last 5 weeks.
Pick up those handcuffs, guys, if they are out there on waivers, especially for those bench guys that you really won't really get into your starting lineup whatsoever. There's 5 weeks left of the year, 4 weeks really for fantasy season. So many more running backs could go down, and that, like Secko said, massive lottery ticket for the Cardinals. Marvin Harrison Jr. trending to not play, same as Trey Benson. Trey McBride, no matter what, you start him. Jacoby Brissett, even in a tough matchup, he just throws the ball that much. I think you can start him. He's just been so solid, has not been outside the top 12 any given week since starting over Kyler. And Michael Wilson, I think you can start him in this one too, even in a tough matchup. The only question, Secko, Zonovan, Bam, Knight, if he is the final running back left, do you want to start him in a tough matchup? They are at home, but they are heavy dogs. But just that standalone running back could offer some value in week 14.
It's probably going to be Michael Carter out of the backfield only, or on third down back, the passing game running back. So yeah, Bam Knight's going to get probably 15 to 18 touches minimum. He can definitely turn them into 70 and a score. So he's shown that he's been pretty good actually. For his opportunities, which is he can sort of hang his hat on that. He's been better than probably he was originally billed to be, which is again good on him for doing that. So I think again in a pinch, he's definitely startable. He's definitely in that sort of RB3 range for me. I wouldn't be rushing to want to start him. But if Dean Mercado is out and Benson doesn't get up, I think there's he's definitely a guy who's going to get plenty of work and more work than other guys who you'd be looking to start. So he's averaging in one down game against San Fran, but he still scored a touchdown and had 5 carries. Outside of that, he's averaging 11, 12 carries a game. It's a good floor, and that's been sharing a lot as well. So, yeah, 100% startable. Just not someone again I'd want to be, running to pick up and start if I could avoid it.
And in the prime time to close out the Monday morning slate, should I say, Sunday night football, Texans heading to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. Chiefs are a field goal favorite, 42 total points, coming off a loss to the Cowboys. And I'm not just saying this because I am a Bills fan and I love seeing the Chiefs lose, but I think they could lose again. They are decimated on that offensive line. They've got Justin Simmons or Josh Simmons, their first round pick at tackle that they had this year. I think he's been on IR. Their starting right tackle, Jawan Taylor, did not practice this week with triceps and a knee injury. The starting right guard, Trey Smith, also a DNP. It is lining up that both of those guys will miss. And on the other side of the ball, the Texans arguably have the best pass rush, I think, in football at the moment. Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson Jr., they only need to rush 4. Those guys are just way too good. Mahomes, under pressure, does not look good whatsoever. I know the Bills I watched that game very closely. Joey Bosa was just all over Mahomes and he struggled big time. And these guys are even better at rushing and getting after the passer there. So don't love it for the Chiefs. I mean, the running backs, I'm not starting any of those. Kelsey, you'll probably do that shorter area of the field. Rashee Rice, no matter what, he's lights out. But how do you see this game taking off, Secko? Are you kind of on the Chiefs here, or can you kind of seeing the Texans edge away in what probably will be a defensive game?
Well, I think it's definitely going to be a defensive game. I do think the Chiefs win it because they need to win it to have any chance of the playoffs at the moment. They're getting to that critical stage, and the positive thing, which is immeasurable, is that some of the calls are not going their way this year. Which people call me conspiracy theorist, but we've all watched the last 7 seasons of NFL football. They've got absolutely every rub of the green that could exist for 7 straight years. So it's good to see some 50-50 balls or calls going against them. And that's the difference between being 11-1 and 6-6, which they were 11-1 last year this time. So, but yeah, look, it's in Arrowhead. The other reason why I think they're more likely to win, I think Rice and Kelsey are good enough. I think Kareem's doing enough to get them there. And I think this is the kind of game where it's sort of, 5 field goals and a touchdown will be enough to win the game. And that's sort of what Kansas City can do. They can definitely get the ball the 40 yards to get into Butker's field goal range. And that's sort of what I feel it's going to be at. Don't love Texans, the offense. I mean, I would love to love them. I'm a big fan of Nico, big fan of Woody Marks, obviously. Love CJ Stroud. I just don't love them to score enough against the Chiefs to really make it a game. It's probably somewhere in that sort of 21-15 kind of game.
Yeah, it's going to be a gross one. Maybe I'm just a bit too biased just because I'd love to see the Chiefs lose. But Patty Mahomes,
I'd love to see them lose.
Yeah.
6-7 would be fantastic, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
And for the Texans side of the ball, Secko, Woody Marks, he's dealing with an injury. Probably don't want to start either of those running backs in this game if you can anyhow. Nico Collins, you can start him. He's going to get all the targets there. CJ Stroud, risky start because I think Chiefs are going to have to lean on their defense in this one. Anybody else really that you want to mention? The rookies, Jaden Higgins, he's kind of been a little bit more solid lately. Is he worth a mention?
Definitely worth a mention. I know he was picked up in a lot of leagues in waivers that ran. He's probably was up in that, up in the sort of top handful of pickups this week. It's hard to line up because he has been more involved. But Christian Kirk is still there. I think he's coming back. Xavier Hutchinson still gets involved. Dalton Schultz still gets plenty of targets every week. So there is still plenty of mouths to feed, and it's just so hard against the Chiefs. Spags game plan so well for the team they're playing, and that's why they do so well. Their defense holds so well, and I feel like it's one of those games where you definitely start Nico, but you could start Higgins or Schultz or Marks if he plays, but you wouldn't really want to do it. You wouldn't want to be going into Sunday night in a must-win, win-and-in playoff game on the line sort of situation, and wanting to rely on Jaden Higgins to have 10 PPR points. I just don't know if that's how you want to, spend your Monday afternoon.
Yeah, it'd be a tough watch if you're relying on those guys to get you in.
Yeah.
And to close out week 14, Not a divisional game, but there's plenty on the line here. The Eagles heading to LA to take on the Chargers in a dome. Eagles are just under a field goal favorite on Monday Night Football. The total is a low 40.5 total points. You don't love that. Probably going to be another defensive slog in this game. I know with Herbert dealing with that injury, I know if I was a head coach, I'd be trying to put it in the running backs' hands as much as possible and try and remove any hits that he may take. Kamon O'Dell has been solid. Amir and Hampton may return this week. It is lining towards he's probably more on that 60-40, 60% chance that he probably does play in this one, I think. Eagles have been beatable up against the run the last few weeks as well. I mean, we saw what the Bears did last week in that one there. So how do you see this one playing out, Secko? I know for me on the Chargers side of the ball, Lad McConkey, probably the only one I feel most comfortable. I don't really like the running backs because they're probably going to have to split if Hampton does get the start.
Yeah, I don't love the running backs. I'm as a Hampton guy, I want to see him back, just to see what it's like. And this is the kind of game before playoffs start that I'd love to see him have a free game on the 14th week. But yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty even split. They're going to have to lean on him pretty heavily, and we just saw what the Bears did to Philly, though. So the blueprint's potentially there. With Herbert's hand, it may just be and he can still scare defenses enough. He can still do a lot of play action to open up those running lanes a little bit. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Vidal and Hampton both have a usable game, but I wouldn't be confident starting either without knowing, especially on the last game of the week, which shouldn't matter, but it does. The Lad McConkey is the only one startable. You can't start Justin Herbert. One knock, he could be out. Like he could be a one play guy. I don't love Trey Lance for anybody if he comes into the game, but I think Lad is the most bust proof at the moment out of that team. QJ was good last week. Gadsden has a chance to be good again, but I think you need Herbert fully fit to maximize those guys.
And for the Eagles, man, their offense has looked so horrid. They don't run any play action. They're not running any motion whatsoever. Super stagnant, super vanilla. But it's hard to sit the main guys. I mean, Jalen Hurts, the tush push, he just finds his way into the end zone no matter what. Saquon, it's hard to sit him too, even though he has not been playing well. And AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. Again, the total is low at just over 40.5 total points, but it could go higher than that just given the caliber of both of these teams. So both Devonta and AJ Brown, pardon me, could be in play. It's a hard one, Secko. There's so many studs on the Eagles, but the play calling and scheme is just horrid. So how do you feel about these guys to close out week 14?
It's definitely the hardest over under to call. It could very easily be under 35, and you wouldn't be surprised. But I think that line's there with the thought that Herbert may be hampered, and it's just going to be a bit of a they're going to running the ball on both sides, just runs the clock out, makes it a shortened game and less scoring opportunities. So, but look, yeah, from the Eagles side, it's hard to say. Every chance they go massive, and they do what they've done a couple of times this year, where either AJ Brown or Devonta Smith go big. I think Jalen Hurts is there. It's the kind of game where Saquon could just go off as well. He's probably due for that. Don't know if it's going to happen because he seems to be wearing down a little bit, but it could definitely happen. So it's one of those. It's weird, one of those ones where I'd almost like to avoid as much as I can because I literally have no idea what's going to happen. The Eagles will look putrid seemingly every other week, and they could do it again, and no one really gets their fantasy points up. And then the Chargers can be the same. So it's a bit of a weird one. Weird over under, weird teams. It's a must win. They're both 8-4. A win pretty much virtually gets you into the playoffs at this rate. Could still miss, obviously, but the Chargers go up to I think an 80% chance of making the playoffs if they win. Eagles go to 98% chance of making the playoffs if they win. So they just want to do that. They want to win, which makes me think it might be a gross game. Get in there, get out of there, kind of old school football. Especially it's in Philly, isn't it?
It's in LA.
In the Dome.
Yep.
Well, there you go. Maybe the over under shouldn't be 40 in the Dome. I just assumed it was a weather game. That's why it was as it was, and the Eagles are favourite. Eagles shouldn't be favourite going cross country, by the way. My regular disclaimer as well: East Coast team going to the West Coast to play. Take the Chargers plus 2.5. Gamble responsibly.
Gamble responsibly, and that will do it to close out the Week 14 primer. Guys, if you have any start-sit questions, make sure to pop them on the YouTube comments once we close this thing out, and we'll be sure to get to them before the games kick off tomorrow. Best of luck for Week 14. Hopefully, you've managed to find some guys to fill some holes with all the 4 teams on bye. Final week of the regular season, a lot of teams going to be in do or die spots to close us out and get into the playoffs. How about you, Secko? You playing any games on the line this week to get you in, or are you all sitting pretty comfortable for Week 14?
There's only one league. There's only one league where I'm not in the playoffs, which is good to say. Not already in the playoffs, and that's one of the IFS leagues that we set up. I've lost 3 in a row. I think I'm 7-6 now. So I need to win. I think get in. If I lose, I think I'm out of the only playoffs. I'm out of my seven leagues I'm in. So otherwise, I've done pretty well. I've locked up the buy-in my 2 home leagues that have been running for a long, long time, which is awesome. So we get next week off and this week off, which is doesn't happen very often. So it's a bit of a joy. But how about you, mate? How you faring?
Just looking at it now, I've got a couple of my redraft leagues. I'm all kind of locked up, but there's a couple of dynasty leagues that I'd absolutely love to get in. In both, I'm sitting at 7th. I need to win definitely, and I also need my another guy ahead of me at 6 to lose. And he's in both leagues. They're versing the top team, so I'm kind of it's lining up, but things going to have to go my way this week to edge in. But all in all, if those 2 can get through the door, we'll be smiling come Monday. And also if a special player has a bounce back game, we'll also be smiling when it's all said and done Monday night. But anything else you want to add in, Secko, before we close this thing out for Week 14?
Just one thing. If you can do it, I know it's not always easy to do it. If you're in the southern states, 5 o'clock's not the hardest time to wake up for. Get up at 5 o'clock on Monday, and try and at least watch Red Zone or some of the games. The slate's probably the best Monday morning slate we've had long time. Bengals, Bills, Colts, Jags, Steelers, Ravens. There's some really strong games there. There's a lot of very watchable games in that morning slate. So do yourself a favor, get up and watch it, because it's going to be over before we know it. And that's about it. But go, especially put on that Ravens Steelers game and just count the points by the quarterback wearing purple.
Fingers crossed. That'll do us for the week. Best of luck in Week 14. We'll be back here again on Monday to go through it all again. Thanks for tuning in.
Goodbye.